actual self eventually is to support the self, to support me. So the more that information and that global vision comes into the surface, the best.
You're speaking more in continuity, the way I see it. You're speaking more and more inside of continuity. It's not,
Yes.
and the continuity is meaningful in the in the in the in the speaking and in the in the written.
Yes, yes. The continuity is very important because the new consciousness is continual. Remember that I keep saying to you all the time that it doesn't have a gap, like an evolutionary consciousness. We go in and out of everything, in that sense. The continuity of the consciousness is extraordinary because that's what the field is called, the field. And that when we become more and more connected to that field, then we get to experience the continuity of our own life as well. We get to be inside of the movement of life itself. And it's beautiful because then we can understand that we are with life. We are not living, or we are not observers or anything. We are with life. And that is a fantastic experience because we get to have more energy there because life is all there is. Like love, life is all there is. So anyway, Mary Pat, everything is good, fantastic. Your classes are divine. Your students love you more and more.
Isabel's here.
Hey, Isabel.
Hi, Isabel.
Hi, darling. Nice to see you. So lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Yes. So anyway, what do you think?
I think we're ready to go. We're ready.
Yeah, ready to go. Yes. So anyway, just to open it up, I think that you're starting recording now.
Yes.
Okay. So then just for a few seconds before we start, is there any specifics, any questions about the last Zoom that we have about the spirit, the third entity within the Trinity?
I love that one. That was so beautiful.
Yeah, I loved it too. When I find out what I said, I loved it because, I don't think about the spirit that much, even though the spirit is everywhere and it's all there is. But thinking of the spirit in terms of the Trinity is different because the spirit and the Trinity is a little bit like something up here, something religious and something that is almost external for our lives. So talking about it and put it in terms of my experience of that spirit now made me more closer to the spirit than it was before. Not that I thought that I was separated, but it made me, now in this moment, everything that I see is the spirit. When I see this, all that I see is spirit. Spirit is rejoicing right now, especially because the spirits have returned to the realms of unity. Because remember that I told you that the spirit for a long time, for the whole voyage of evolution, was really actually labor to bring the human in reality back into the union that either was in the garden or either was the union that corresponded to our direct experience of the divinity that vision represented, being in the Garden of Eden, being in the presence of God, being in the presence of everything was known, being in the presence of being totally fulfilled in life. So in our voyage, it was very difficult because certain moments we had it, certain moments we did it, and we didn't. And it was very complex because we did not know it was latently present all the time. So now we do. So that's fantastic, the spirit. And then the spirit reminded me a lot of my mother, because the spirit, there are three things in the spirit. There's the spirit, and then it's the nature, the whole nature. Well, we have it in the eighth dimension is whole nature, which is actually the entire nature that surrounds the planet, but also the entire nature that makes the planet, because it's all made up of the molecular structure that make up form. So the mother principle, which you could say is the garden itself, if it was the Garden of Eden, and then the mother principle, which is the planet Earth, and then the mother principle, which is the love that we all have for the mother as humans, because we all come from mother and father, but the mother is the place that we have experienced from for the first time our genesis. Because remember, when we were in the mother womb, we were in the ideal place, like what we call the Garden of Eden in that sense, because everything that we wanted when we were in our mother's womb, it was instantaneously what is receiving. So everything was, we were in heaven, so to speak, until we got out, and then somebody slapped us and we start crying, and here we are, in this other world, in which now we have to really relearn everything, and the mother is outside, and the mother can give you everything, but only at certain times, and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, the spirit became more united in my sense of self since the last Zoom, because I love my mother, but I love also nature, but I love also the spirit, because the spirit, it was the force that brought us back home. So it has many connotations, the spirit, so it's lovely. So anyway, this is the great Beverly, have come back. Yes, she is, darling, it's lovely to see you, fantastic. So, okay, so then any question before we start? Anything about the last one, anything that comes into your mind? No, I guess not. That's good. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go to the blog now, and I'm going to take you to the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension, as you know, is actually the fulfillment of three dimensions. And the fulfillment of three dimensions, when it came into existence in 1986, became not only the fulfillment of three dimensions, but the existence of fourth dimensions, because the fulfillment of each of the Trinity, each of the dimensions, it gets fulfilled by the next one that it comes after. So three dimensions become fulfilled by fourth dimension, four dimensions and three dimensions become fulfilled by fifth dimension, and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and so forth. Because remember that I told you that the 10 dimensions are not subject to the dualistic interpretation of being more or being less. They are all fulfillments that allow us to know the new consciousness, the new life, the new form of awareness, the new sense of self, the new forming ourselves into everything. So it's all about the 10 dimensions are not inside of the dimension of cause and effect. They are inside of the dimension of unity as wholeness within wholeness. And they are the blessing that always has been promised. And now finally we are in it. So the fourth dimension is actually the three dimensions as it exists within the moment of life. The Trinity as it exists within the moment of life. Because remember, the Trinity always existed as something in the Catholic Church, as something that very few of us understood, and something that we to be religious and so forth. So it never was part of the immediacy of the moment of the physical experience as the fulfillment of the Trinity. Not as the division or what it represents, but the fulfillment. So the fourth dimension is what brought us back to the real three dimensions, to the real union with the Trinity for the first time, in which we can see them from the makeup of three dimensions, not just only from the makeup of religion, it's from the makeup of the three senses that allow us humans to make sense of anything. So I have the feeling that even in the religious form, there must be some essence about the Trinity always being the very nature of our consciousness. But I don't know. I have never been able to ask a priest if that's what they think so. If the very nature of being human, by being human, represents the very nature of three dimensions that the Trinity is. But we know that that's so right now. So the Trinity itself became fulfilled for the fourth dimension. And then the fourth dimension allow us to be present within the moment of life, from which the moment of life becomes our union with all things. So everything that it becomes received again as consciousness, as an enlargement of our consciousness, is always present within the present now. It's never anymore projected as something that you're going to someday receive or something that you're going to become acquainted with it, or something that you're going to be able to understand, or something that you're going to eventually fully come into correspondence with it. Because the difference between that particular thought system and the new one is that in the new one, everything is present. So whenever you catch yourself in any degree that you are thinking, oh, someday, remember that it's now, always. So bring it into the now. And by being in the now, you are going to be much more clearly in the someday, because in the someday, it's not going to give you the now. So it's a reverse. Everything is in here. And it's help you, because then if you something that you feel like you cannot have it yet, it's only relative to yourself, because in reality, you already do have it. The self that is in you already have it, but the personality and all that, maybe, oh no, blah, 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 blah. But if you catch yourself in that train of thought, just come back and say, hey, wait a minute, I don't need to go there. Come back into I have it. And then just make that instantaneous agreement. And then the mind, since you are connecting to the whole field, it will give you the understanding of all the things that you were searching and you did not know that you already have them. Yes? It's simple and complex, but if you spend some time, it's going to be very helpful. Yeah? Because everything has been given. It's complex for humans, for us humans, because we always came from the beginning, since we enter reality through separation, we always thought that we are lacking something, and then eventually someday we'll get it. And it created a lot of complexity and a lot of confusion, because even when we got it, by that time, that became something else. So it never really was actually a sense of fulfillment. But now we have it all. So there is no way that you need to wait in time to get something else. Your entire experience of what your human self means, your entire experience of what your cosmic self means, and your entire experience as what yourself, as God is all here. Because the human and the cosmic are the two sides of the mirror. But the real you is the God itself that is becoming totally connected through merging the two sides of the mirrors. Yeah, the human is the dorky one. The cosmic is the sort of a divine, because it is so big inside of its imagination. But then the real you is the one that make those three in one, the Trinity. And then you get to experience what the garden or the mind is showing you inside of your connection to unity. Because inside of your connection to unity, everything was created for you to experience everything, because that's what the creation was. God gave you everything, which means that everything is present. Whatever you want, you can receive it in the now. And then as you receive it in the now, you are actually fulfilling the prophecy of the given, and you allow all things, not only yourself, but all things to become more present and more present and more present. You can see how the world is becoming more present, right? There are many, many places in the world right now, in our world, that they are becoming very complex, because we're going through so many changes very quickly. But you can see how the changes are beginning to take form in a different form, because our humanity is becoming present in who they are, each of us is, and being less subject, oh, can you give it to me? Can you not give it to me? Can I have it? Can I not have it? That sense of dependency to the external circumstances is now occupied from the presence that is the creation and the receiving of the very thing that we were waiting for. And it's ever present. Yeah. It's beautiful and very, very wonderful. So I encourage you for that. So then, are we good then? Can we continue? Any questions? I'm very surprised that Cynthia Divine didn't ask for any questions so far. And I can see that her mind's going, okay, do I wanted to ask something? But I don't know. I'm teasing you, darling. Cynthia, do you have any questions? We need to ask, we need to to hear your question. But anyway, I'm going to share the screen, okay? And then what I would like to do, I'm getting more comfortable in getting in and out of the screen. I went to school and have taught me some, but I'm still a little bit shaky, but I'm going to be good. But I would like to, if it's possible, to start narrating the images and then come back and see once in a while with you. So then I said, okay, how you doing? Are you doing good? There is in one image that you want questions or something, then continue and so forth. So I don't have to leave you for so long because I miss you when you are not in front of me. Okay, so here we go. So then fantastic. So now share the screen, beautiful, and it has two things, two shares. And here we go. So here we are now in our blog. And now what's happening, we're going to go through the images that we some of them you have known, but some of this you haven't seen that. And what we wanted to explain in terms of images and symbols is the moment of transition of consciousness in which we went from the linear consciousness, from our linear existence inside of the realms of duality, into the moment that the transition occurred. And it occurs only in one moment. It wasn't that, okay, we're going to get the transition, it's going to spend time. Since it wasn't subject of time, because all of time merges into one. So it was one moment that transformed everything. So I wanted to see if I can convey that in symbols, and then assist in any way the mind to have a symbol in mind. Oh, I see, this is what happened. So the mind can begin to comprehend it from your own personal inner sense inside of your own mind. So we're going into the fourth dimension that is called presence. And in the celebration, we call it a creation. Remember, for Lois, that was left for Lois as an homage to Lois, because she said, no, she would like to maintain it as presence. So presence, creation, the presence of life, unfolding at unity and motion, the eternal moment of life. So we leave it there, yes? So then we picture universal balance here. Universal balance being these beautiful, beautiful flowers. That's one of our cars, Carolina and myself cars. It has the Trinity here, 1, 2, 3, you know, being the branch of it. It is a universe unfolding and expanding forever in infinity. And it is the geometry of perfect proportions embracing the universe, because the universe is not in a vacuum. Wherever you're going, you're being matched what is meeting you. Yes, the universe, by going into infinity, it doesn't mean that it's in a void. It's being received by everything inside of the fountain of life. Nothing is separated from the whole. Yes, so then today we're going to be in the fourth dimension. Here we go. Let me see. Actually, I'm going to go here. So this is the fifth dimension. Here, beautiful. The presence, what presence represented, it became the union. Remember, through the 5 triads, it became the union of the 3 triads. The triads that is whole awareness, the whole mind of life, love, the boundless feeling of love, of life, excuse me, and then physical reality, the ecstasy of life. So those 3 senses became one for the first time in the instant of the harmonic conversions, in the new consciousness. This is a big deal. This is a big deal because before, it was very, very, very complex for us to be able to understand what the unity of the 3 senses of the self was or is. Yes? So I would like, if it's possible, to stop share. I'm going to come back with you here. I'm going to go here. So just for a second, I'm going to return, but I wanted to be with you to explain this. When we were inside of the realms of duality, everything was relative because it was inside of an escalation of understanding that sometimes have moments of insight, but sometimes have moments of great confusion. And the confusion came as a consequence of the mind wanting to go somewhere, the feeling say, no, I don't want to go there. And then the physical body, the physical moment as it corresponded to the reality itself was always in conflict between what the mind thinks, what the heart feels, and the moment itself. That most of the time in the dualistic reality, it innocently was asking for something else. In the moment of saying, no, you can't go there, you can't have this, you can't have that, you gotta understand, you can't because of money, because of what is needed, or because of family, or because of your process, or because of your school, everything. So we were always in conflict trying to pursue what unity meant for us humans. So it was very complex because all the many interpretations of consciousness, and then because we did not know what the integration between the mind, the feeling, and the action really meant, because we saw them as three separated worlds. Yes. So the fourth dimension is a big deal because it united our entire sense of self. So we are for the first time inside of the unity of our sense of self, in which my mind is exactly the same as my heart, and my heart is exactly the same as the physical moment in which I am living with every single human being on the planet. So this is a big deal because I'm not making any translations between what I think, what I feel, and what I am doing. It's all one. So it's different because before, innocently, without even knowing, we constantly translation. Oh, I cannot say this because it's going to create problems. Or I cannot feel this because I'm going to be weak and nobody will understand it, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, in the physical moment, I have to find a way to balance everything. And when you're starting getting into that world of balances, you're always out because yourself became the place between hide and seek, hide and seek, instead of being the reality itself. So this is the first time that we are experiencing as consciousness the very union of ourselves. And we are getting it in a different world, each of us in a different way, because it is individualistically essential. Each of us is different as a reality of consciousness, but each of us is the same thing in the sense that each of us, in the wholeness that we are, we share in the same world, and that world is always the Garden of Eden, always the Garden of Eden. It has many connotations. So I'm going now to share the screen below, and I'm going to have another one share the screen, and here I am. So returning into it here, the fourth dimension, I want you to notice that those two spheres, the sphere of feeling, right here, love, balance, beauty, and self, and consciousness, crown, and unity, which is the first trinity that we just done, are united inside of itself by the interlacing of the two spheres. And in between the two spheres, right here, is the Vesica Pisces. The Vesica Pisces is an extraordinary design that has many connotations, and someday we can talk about it. But anyway, the Vesica Pisces is the release of the center right here, which is that the sound of your being for the first time is saying what it is. Instead of saying sometimes the confusion into what you think,
Christian, I don't know if you can hear me, but you're frozen. I don't know. I don't know. Christian, there you go. Okay. Carol, it looks like Carol ran off to see if she can help
yeah.
Christian. Oh, there he
Okay.
is. He's back.
Oh,
You're back. There you are.
okay, I'm going back. So now I'm going to go share the screen again, okay?
Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you very much that I share the screen. So here we are. Thank you. It's just many things that happen in the broadband, but I'm not going to tell you the internet is a little crazy. So anyway, here we are in 0-point balance in the presence of it. And I'm not going to read, we have put, Carolina and I have put a lot of info, not a lot, some synthesis of information in all of the images. And they are a little bit to explain the images and guide you to understand what it is that we're trying to portray a little bit more. So you still have the freedom of create whatever you want to with the images, but we can guide you a little bit. But I'm not going to read this explanations of this sharing of information, because it will be boring reading and spending too much time. But I want you to read it, and then I would like you to create, if it's possible, notes, and then we go from it. So we're going to go to the first one. Okay, so we're going to go to the first graphic, which is called the whole field of consciousness. And I think that I told you before, the whole field of consciousness is the sphere formation, in which in this particular graphic is form of tetrahedrons. And tetrahedrons is, if you think that each of those compartments is an aspect of consciousness that exists as one within the sphere, it is the design of wholeness within wholeness, in which the mind, the heart, and the physical moment of life live simultaneous with life itself. So it's a system in which you are life, and life is you, and your mind, your feelings, and your action as one. Each of those tetrahedrons is the whole scenario. It has 100 expressions of mind. In the center of it, which we don't have it in this graphic, is actually 101, but you will see it. So anyway, it's not a big deal about the hundreds, but just to really, I can tell you about it, but I don't want to spend too much time. But if you want to ask the question again, and I tell you, 100 representations of the sphere. The reason that all this tetrahedrons exist, because if I say to you, all directions, everything, expansion in life is all directional. Without the self-enclosure of the sphere, the mind will never understand what all directions means. It will have something like the sun that it goes in all directions, but the actual self-enclosing of the sphere is essential for the mind to understand what infinity represents. Without the self-enclosure of the mind, you will never be able to understand what the freedom of the mind and the infinite nature of the mind is. Because in the linear mind that we evolved as human, you need those two possibilities in order to get to the third one, which is the union between that thought, the self-enclosure of a form, and the infinite relation to that form. So the sphere, even though is a self-enclosed inside of itself, is actually eventually the way that we can understand how the inside and the outside are the same. So we call it the whole field of consciousness, because the whole field of consciousness, what always existed before the beginning of time, before the beginning of time, it was the eternal field in which we live, from which Genesis then became represented, and from which the evolution of the species become represented as the voyage that we call our human evolution. So those two things got represented inside of the third ever-existing background, if we wanted to call it God, that always existed and will always exist, is the given, the field, okay? So in this one, then we go into this particular field, as it was inside of evolution, was self-enclosed inside of the human experience in the planet Earth. We live inside of this field as the planet, and that's inside of this cube is the consciousness of the planet and the consciousness of human, from which we have evolved from the beginning. From Genesis and from Darwinian theory, we have evolved inside of the system. So the system was enclosed inside of itself in order to make sure that we were all together manifesting ourselves as one in evolution. So even though we were all individuals awareness as humans, every time that we live in the planet, we were always existing inside of a collective consciousness that was the unfolding nature of our evolution, getting ready continuously to get us back home, which had already happened. But that was the thing, searching for the reality of the self-enclosing of consciousness, searching for the reality of life. This is where we were. So then from here, this is the square again. This is the self-enclosure of evolution, but then inside, in the difference between this graphic and the other one, this one is the consciousness. And this one is the planet, which is the same. You see, one is a tetrahedron, the sphere, and the other one is the planet Earth, which is also made up of tetrahedrons, if you want to put it that way, because the planet has a center, as you know, that it spins into extraordinary speed. But the planet is the garden from which we have grown and have existed from the beginning of this fable called, as we said in the beginning, evolution, and as Colin and Salas has said before Genesis. Yeah. So then when we decided, we started the evolutionary nature, the way that we evolved in nature, in evolution, was to be able to, if we understand it from the perspective of the Darwinian theory, is the beginning to set about to create a scenario from which the mind can progress as to eventually understand itself fully, and then in the understanding of itself fully, return to the original imprint, that is the context of its own wholeness. So the mind here, we developed through the levels of duality. So duality was, okay, this is night, this is morning, this is earth, this is a plant, this is every single thing in that time became a way of seeing things. We named things, and at the same time that we name things, in order to be able to make a sense in our mind, we created a difference. So what, love and hate, or green or dead, or no light, earth or heaven, everything had its own counterbalance inside of the realms of duality, in order to be able to have a sense of meaning within our lives. So duality, it wasn't terrible or anything like that. It was actually what brought us home, but it was the field of our mind from which we evolved, and through many thousands and thousands and thousands of comparisons or dualities or differences, we created this whole scenario, which we call our world, which is an extraordinary vast. Yes. So at the same time that we manifest in duality, a lot of the duality, since we always was part of our essential nature, self-contained within itself, flashes and moments of unity, from which then it fulfilled our sense within ourselves, and it gave us faith, and it gave us a strength. But we were always in some degree trying to figure it out. Not this, not that, I like it, not like it, I love you, I may not love you, I feel great, I don't feel great, I am depressed, I'm exuberant, I like this food, but I hate that thing. So everything was inside of a symbol that is constantly, innocently bombarding the self about, oh yeah, blah, 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 blah. The mind was very much occupied in trying to make sense of everything out of the sense of survival that it was deeper embedded in our consciousness. Because it was, we said that evolutionary nature of our human self was subject to the survival of the species. Yes, so we all carry it within ourselves. It's the same thing that a bird carries. When a little bird comes into existence, it's not totally innocent. It already knows that somebody may come to eat it right away. So you can see it already. Everything just already have the memory and the genetics that we have to take care of ourselves in something we have, because life was very, very precarious in that sense. And we all carry the memory of the emotional content and the genetics of what we have experienced. So the genetical code is the memory bank of all the experiences of all the humanity that have made possible, out of continuity, your presence in the moment of life now. So some of us came in the planet with less fear already, because we have processed it inside of the memory of human. Some of us came into the planet very, very innocently traumatized, So we came here to see if we can really release everything so we can become free as beings, because we have the memory within ourselves of many, many stories that we didn't know even that we have it. But those stories have affected our experience of life. You can understand a little bit about it, okay? What I'm saying is a lot to say because we can really go more deeper into that, but anyway. So the difference between the symbol and this other symbol, this one I put 4 dualities in here just to be able to give you the symbol. And that one I added more, we added more, but what I want you to understand that the dualities were all different expressions of polarities existing inside of this beautiful, beautiful sphere made up of points of reference or awareness. So it's a simplistic way, but it's the way that the mind can understand how all these points of awareness created the reality that we call the daily life within ourselves. And this reality, as it jumping enormously from hundreds, from 50 and 50 from here of polarities, jumping to it, it got to be the point in which in our evolution of the species, in our remember of Genesis, there got to be a point in which the last of the tetrahedrons was ready to really fulfill the sphere. So the last of the tetrahedrons, just for the sake of understanding and simplicity, was just before the harmonic conversions, in which we have gone through quantum civilization, hundreds of religions, thousands of spiritual paths. I have gone through coming and going, have going, ever and ever and ever, like Groundhog Day forever. Yes. And you can understand that if you understand, for example, that Easter has been happening for the last 100 years, and as it is right now in Saturday, may happen for another 100 years. So what means that we are repeating constantly the story in order to keep it alive, but it's a repetition of the story. We were never before inside of the renewal. We were always inside of the celebration of the ancestry. We didn't know what a renewal was. Yeah. Should I continue? Are you right? This is a lot what I'm saying because
I got a question, Christian. Okay.
Yeah, let me just get up for a moment here just to be with you completely. I'm going to go now and share the screen. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry, Dana.
Okay. So before you started this segment, you were talking about duality and you were in balance and you were going like this. All right. Okay. Which makes me think of a balance beam, which makes me think that that's linear. Okay. Duality was
remember that we were
linear.
inside of the linear modality of consciousness. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then as we move forward, but then when we do movements, we have balance this way and this way, but it is sort of linear, but it's in a sphere like, right? So when you bring up the sphere with all the little triangles, right?
Yes.
In my mind, I think that everything is interdependent on each other and interconnected because that whole sphere is all interconnected.
Beautiful.
Now, my question is, have you ever seen one of those balls that closes and opens and closes and opens, right?
The tensegrity balls.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when one part fails and we're all interconnected, it can collapse, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So,
yes.
So how do we create it in continuity to be continuous?
Yes. Okay. So we'll get to it. We'll get to the graphics. Okay. So I'm going now to share the screen one more time. We'll get to it.
I think in simple terms. I know.
No. Listen, there is no such a thing as simple terms. You're thinking about, because simplicity, let me stop the share, go back into here. There is something that I want you to understand. There is no such a thing as simple terms, because in reality, while we're talking about the new consciousness, the reality itself, the simplest form and the most complex form are simultaneous. So what that means, that you can see it from the most simple way, just living in the garden, or you can see it from the whole understanding, which is the all. The same as saying the one and the all. The one is the simple, the all is the enormous complexity. But the difference now, that the one and the all the simple and the complex, are becoming one. So we all learning that we were never simple. In reality, we are the totality of the all. So it takes time a little bit for us to come into correspondence with that, because each of us created an idea of the self-containment of our consciousness. That's what we call personality, and that's what we call individuality, and many times inside of the linear consciousness. But inside of the whole field of consciousness, each of us is the whole. So it takes a little while to be able to allow the mind to uncover and begin to bring the totality of all possibilities of awareness that existed within your sense of self. But I want you to understand that the simplicity of yourself, it will be always the same as the whole perspective. And the whole perspective will be the simplicity as you begin to embody that. All right? It's a long conversation again that we can go into, but I'll continue because I would like to really come back into. So then this is the last frame just before, right here, just before consciousness reunited itself. It needed the last frame. And in the last frame, we said that possibly was really quantum entanglement, that it was really actually the discovery of physics that says that the universe was not inside of the realms, the reality or the whole universe was not in the realms of time, location, and distance. That everything existed simultaneously in one instant. They wouldn't say one instant, that everything existed simultaneously, period. And that was the existence of the field in which we live. Remember that I give you that address that I want you to watch, that it was really in Nova, it was done in Nova in NTV, and I think it was in a program called Nova, that explained all the different phases in which physics went into discover by going to an enormous distance in different places in the universe to make sure to prove what quantum entanglement meant. And it meant that if one thing is moved instantaneously without time, distance, or location, the other one also moves. It's exactly the same thing that Cynthia Devine is saying. That if one thing in the tetrahedron has in any way is the all, and in the all is the one, and they are all simultaneously connected. So she's talking about the actual discovery of quantum entanglement, the physics, quantum entanglement. So the reason that we say that this is perhaps is the last discovery that from the moment of completion in 1986 is because spirituality has talking forever about us, told us about that we are one and we are the all, all the gurus, all the teachers, all the religions, hundreds of paths. But in that time, you couldn't live it in the moment because the physical moment was like the circus, the enormous place in which everybody innocently was divided, suffering, and so forth. And the gurus and teachers said that was samsara, that it was not real. Yes, you know that, you remember that. So in the story of our spirituality, the everything got projected into a form of learning. You learn meditation for hundreds of years until you learn that the moment is perfect. You learn behavior. You learn the higher forms of mind that you could think. You learn many, many, many things that eventually will get you figuratively to a more attunement. So in that time, the attunement was projected for the idea that by the time that we leave the planet and we sort of we pass through the life and death, that we get to another dimension that will be higher than the dimension that we live in now. Because the dimension that we live in now, it was considered very painful and very sad and physical. It is nature, which meant that the physicality of that nature could not support the higher level of the conscience, of evanescent consciousness that did not correspond to that vibrational sense of physics. the vibrational sense of the physical world. So the physical world was considered to be an undesirable, a little bit, point of existence, even though it was the school, but it was undesirable because it was always accompanied with a lot of pain, suffering, discovery, learning, and it was all a voyage to eventually to be fulfilled either in the kingdom of heaven or either in some particular dimension in the higher planes in which you get to be in samadhi forever and you get to be in the presence of God forever. So you understand that because all of us understand what that happens in that. So the reason that this, I think, is physics, because we said that in the moment that the physical world or the understanding of physics, which is the understanding of nature, you know, the plane that we're living into, can really discover the unity of what the spiritual world has projected, in that moment, everything will become one again. And then we will enter for the first time the place in which the human existence will match simultaneously all the different higher levels that no longer existed in distant location or time, but exist within the very moment of our human lives. So this is a big, big trip, big things that I'm telling you, a lot, because it figures that it was to be physics, because the professors in physics, all the professors, many of the professors that we have created, you know, the great minds, they were always, you know, Einstein was like couldn't go on the bicycle, you had to really take him from one place to another. They didn't function in the physical world. And the professor were living in the world of mind. And the world of mind was so involved with mathematics and feelings and so forth, that was almost disconnected from the physical world. But it was creating information to be able to eventually assist us when all the information come together so it can merge. Now, the physicists didn't know what that was either, because when they discovered quantum entanglement, the first thing that they said, I said, we don't know how to use it. How do you use this? Something that everything is instantaneous, because if you don't have a comprehension a little bit of the spiritual world or the different facets of consciousness, it will be complex to really comprehend that everything can exist at the same time in one dimension, and everything can exist in a linear time in another dimension. And that the two of them exist with a third one that was making all of it atomically one as the moment of life. So they couldn't understand that, but they did brought us into for the first time to the mental understanding of the atomic unity in which things did not exist as separation. So then when that happened, for the first time, when that tetrahedron became completed, then the tetrahedron, the completion of the tetrahedron, and there's information here that I want you to study for a while, but I'm not going to read it because I don't want it to be that way. I was just going to say that when the tetrahedrons became completed, the best way to look at them, and remember that this is an example, this is the most simple image for the mind to comprehend what that is in some degree, because the mind made of linear reality is very difficult to comprehend wholeness. Yeah? Even though the mind in its purity is complete wholeness, and the evolutionary consciousness, the mind doesn't understand wholeness. It doesn't have any way to connect to it. It's an idea, or it's a philosophical idea, that it cannot understand it. So the best way to understand the symbol is to think about or imagine that each of those tetrahedrons is made up of a mirror glass. So that each of the tetrahedron, when it got completed, reflected for the first time in all the formations of mirror images a center. And the center came into existence for the first time because before we didn't have a center. Before, if you allow me to for a moment, to show you something that was very important. Before, duality was an interchanging relationship of many premises that were constantly relating itself, but they were not relating itself from perspective of wholeness. They were relating the sense from the relative point of reference. So it created a creative unfolding, but it was always inside of the conflict. It's always inside of the intellectual or the emotional or the physical, or everything becomes like an extraordinary voyage of mind that was continuously interrelating inside of a sphere that did not have a center, until the moment in which the entire sphere of consciousness became complete, when physics, for now, just to give you an idea so the mind can understand how it became whole, it manifested the center. And when it manifested the center, for the first time, all of the points of reference, I give you to here, all of the points of reference of the mirror reflection reflecting the center had a center, a reflected center from which they can understand the whole. So each of the individual interpretations of concepts and ideas that brought evolution to its fulfillment, before its fulfillment, could never really understand the whole. But when it became connected in one instant, then for the first time, each of those frames of reference had a center from which the center became the whole, and then the whole becomes the same as the center for everyone. So the consciousness for the first time entered a new symbol of mind in which everything was known, everything, it was quantum entanglement, everything was present, everything existed, and the within, what it was within, it was the same as what it was without. So the center, the within, and the without became one. And that is the instant in which the linear consciousness transposed itself from a linear interrelationship of premises into a holistic interrelationship of premises, in which everyone can really now relate with everyone inside of wholeness and be able to start comprehending what does it mean to be in a field in which my physical moment, for the first time, knows everything, understands everything, feels everything, and is actually relating with everything from the perspective of the completion and renewal of all things, instead of from the perspective of the observer realizing what was wrong in the very interaction. Because the observer, it gets from one aspect to the other one of the field of polarity, but it always said, I like in moral calculation, and the whole idea inside of evolution was that eventually, if you go through the opposite, you will get to the center. And it always existed as an idea, but you can never keep it, because life, you cannot keep it frozen. So then, since we didn't know in that time that the center was ever existing, balance became the most elusive of all treasures. If you think the most elusive treasure in the entire history of humanity is balance, which is the same as love, but it's balance. Because that's what everybody wanted forever. That's what all the teachers was, all the gurus, everything wanted to be balanced. But the complexity is that we could not live in a field of balance, that you had to keep it, because you cannot keep balance. Balance only exists because it moves with everything else. So this is the first time that balance became present in the planet Earth, and the three senses became one. And then what we call within and what we call without became one and the same. Yes? Okay, let me see. Let me go for a moment. I'll come back right away, okay? Just to be with you. This is a lot what I'm saying, but but I want you to know that the within and the without became the same. It meant for us humans, for the first time, not for the consciousness, because the consciousness transposed itself, and that was it. We live inside a new field of consciousness. Years ago, and just now we're beginning to understand it, because in the beginning we didn't know what that was, because our mind was made of dualistic principles. In the new consciousness, it exists inside of the realms of unity. It's one with the universe. It doesn't exist inside of the teeter-totter. It's the solution of all things, it's the creation of all things, it's the love of all things. But for us, it was very complex, because each of us humans, we interpreted our personality and our individuality as a self-containment. So we had an inner world that very rarely share it, We only share it sometimes with the people we love, but that inner world is secret for us. Even sometimes with the people that you love, that you live all your life and you're married and have grandchildren, you'll never be able to share your inner world because you think that somebody will think you're crazy. Because the inner world is something that we don't have words or dialogues to talk to each other about. Usually we talk about in our conversation about the external world, but the inner world. So the inner world of each of us is becoming one with the outer world. And it's a trip, and it's very complex because we were very self-protected inside of the inner world. So now that we're coming out, we're learning through the divine and through the new consciousness to be able to be externally, and whatever is universal and whatever is earthy and physical and inner are the same thing. So we're going through this process of transmutation, which is a form of alchemy in which you are all becoming transformed into the new self that we are. So because each of us is the God that we always worship. And you cannot touch that God if you are not that thing. God then becomes a projection in an idea, and it doesn't exist as a projection and as an idea. We can create whatever symbols you want, but the God that is God, it only comes as a consequence of your unification with that particular idea, projection, sensation, feeling that you have created inside of your genetical code and inside of the particular experience of this life. God is the very breath of your existence. It's fantastic. It's the kingdom of heaven. It's the Garden of Eden. It's everything. Yes. So anyway, I'll continue with it. So the reason I'm stopping is because I wanted to maybe bring in a moment of stillness to understand that the merging of the within and without with the consciousness, it meant in that instant in 1986 that each of us humans, for the first time, the three senses of the self were coalescing into one, and what we consider to be within our inner world and the outer world were beginning to merge, which was very scary for certain people. Some people, they didn't know that the inner or the outer existed. Some people had an inner world that was saintly. It was you can never go to the other world. Some people were totally out, but they were always trying to get the inner, because if you're totally out in the discrepancy, sometimes you can be inside of the presence of mental illness, which is that the mind becomes very confused and it doesn't have any place to support the self. Yes. So anyway, we'll continue with it. Are you okay with me? Are you all right? You need a glass of water? Are you good? So now we're going now.
I have a question though.
Okay,
another
can you hold it for a second? Yeah,
I
hold it for a
can,
second.
I can,
So we continue.
okay.
I'll give you the moment, yeah, because I wanted to get to this symbol. So we finished with that one, right? This one is something that I want you to spend a lot of time to observe in your, if you can, contemplation. Because this one, if you look at it for a while, you say, okay, the mind, the whole periphery is made of mirrors. It connected to the center, and for the first time have the centers. So the center was wholeness, but each of the peripheries are also wholeness. So then it existed in another world that is separated as conceptual interpretations between within and without and so forth. It was one, and the oneness is actually the moment itself. That's what it is, the moment of three dimensions, the Trinity for the first time came into existence. So the planet Earth also became instantaneously three-dimensional. It always was, but when this reality, the planet Earth was connected to everything, because the planet Earth and our human experience and the planet Earth are one indivisible consciousness. It's not that the planet is conscious and then we are here. No, the planet experiences the very consciousness, the garden, if you may, that we had, and we have the very consciousness of the garden. So we were existing inside of this field called planet Earth, the nature, yes? The nature that surrounds us. And you can understand how the nature that surrounds us was very complex, because the planet have gone through many, 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 many stories inside of itself, in which its purity of nature can become compromised a lot. You can understand why the global warming and the rivers and the soil and the oils and so forth. We created a lot of stories inside of our mind that in some degree, innocently, because we never even were conscious that we did that, have really actually harmed it or created complexity to the planet that now is present with everything. So in the instant, this is all one instant in which the consciousness, the within and the without, and the consciousness be birthed in that moment, the boundaries that self-contain the separation of the planet between the universe and us separated from the planet became instantaneously dissolved, completely dissolved. We have released the boundaries. This is the moment that we became free. That, as I said, it took a long time to begin to discover, because we thought the freedom was that somebody will give us the tool for us to feel finally free within ourselves. We didn't know the freedom is actually in the inner sense of our beings. We were born in freedom. We were, from the beginning of time, we were free. And now we reconnected to the freedom. Yes, so then when that happened, I wanted to bring you back once again a little bit, just to make clear. When we were in the relative consciousness, and when I say to you the relative consciousness or evolutionary consciousness, it is important that you understand that I'm not putting it down. I'm not judging it. I'm just explaining the way that we have evolved, but it was very necessary, because without the evolutionary system and without the evolutionary scenario, we have never been able to merge in the harmonic convergence with the reality of oneness. So evolution was a divine happening, even though it was a very complex, because it's the only way that we can, each of us humans, can really recreate the system that corresponded to the garden, or that corresponded to the Darwinian idea that our mind will expand enough that we were able to perceive things that otherwise could not perceive in our physical interpretation of reality. So it's called the relative now. And it was like a wheel, just to make simple to understand it. This is the wheel of karma. Remember the wheel of karma, the forefathers and all this. The wheel of karma is a wheel that you're always forever going around and around and around and around and around, pursuing ways of purifying your beings. They put it in terms of purification out of the judgment, innocent judgment, that the physical world was doomed, that it could never match the higher levels of consciousness. So the wheel of karma was this wheel that constantly recreated itself. And the wheel of karma, I don't want to call it karma, because it's the wheel of consciousness, because I don't like that word, because karma never was real. It was a projection of the consciousness existing inside of the separation from unity. Yeah, karma, like evil and all those things, are all projections that expresses separation from the reality itself. But they were all innocent, because nobody understood what reality was. So then if you don't know it, how can you be guilty of something that you don't know? Yes, because even if you carry it at the central core of your being, if it's not presence of your consciousness, you don't know it. So you are like a little bit like in another world, and you cannot understand that. So you cannot make somebody responsible for something that they do not know. Yes, that's the reason Christ said in the last, just before the last thing, before became Easter, the last thing said, Father, forgiveness, because they do not know what they do. So what that means is that Christ, before I felt like, oh, my Father, I'm going to be, my God, Father, why you have forsaken me? The next moment, Father, forgive me for not doing what they do. So then that instant between those two dualities, oh, I'm totally gone, oh, forgive them, that instant was the moment of free dimension that God created for us, that it's called the resurrection. And the Catholic Church and everything. It was the beginning of that world, that it was created in that instant, in which from one moment, the relativity of human consciousness becomes transposed into the union that it was the kingdom of heaven. It was fantastic. But then it became 2,000 years of story unfolding inside of interpretation of what that was, until the time that finally we merged for good, in which the second coming, as one of the fulfillments, became actually the kingdom of heaven, as being the consciousness of our humanity that always was, always will be. So we became the kingdom of heaven. It was promised, and it was fulfilled. So the fulfillment is in this one, in the wheel of time. In this graphic, what I wanted to want you to entertain, the extraordinary complexity of the wheel of time expressed in billions and billions, as many as there are human beings on the planet, interpreting reality and living, L-I-V-I-N-G, in the moment of life, recreating the process of the mind inside of their own interchange of duality. It was a lot. But even though it was a lot, remember that the whole field of consciousness was always ever present. So even in this one, which was expressing the complexity of humans, trying to make sense of everything, it existed inside of the whole field of consciousness that always was the Spirit, the Father, and the Son as the three dimensions itself, the reality. The reality was always latent inside of this one, yes? So this one is a good to spend time, because then you can see how blessed we are now that we are outside of the dream, but how extraordinary was there at the same time that the world, our world, with making all human beings, all nations, everything, because it's one planet, creating a new world every moment without not even knowing that we were creating the new world of the world. When we were inside of here, each of us were recreating the moment, living the moment, experiencing the moment, but we never know that we're recreating collectively the entire wheel of evolution, trying to return to its original state. We thought, oh no, I live in this country, the Russians are doing it there, the Islamics are doing it here, they're all doing it, but we didn't know that we were living in the same moment, that we were all sharing the same atomic moment, and we were recreating the very reality of wholeness as we were wanting to unfold. So finally, we got to unfold, and the explosion of the wheel of time. And it was a fantastic event. All this is one moment, right? It was just one moment. I'm telling you everything that was occurring in one moment. Because the mind wants to say, okay, this and this happened there, and this happened there. But it's good for the mind to say, oh, all those events that Sam is talking about is actually occurring in the moment of the convergence, in which the universe aligns itself to a specific alignment of wholeness. And the human evolution, consciousness, matched that moment as well. And then the matching of the universal and the human created the third entity, which was the release of all boundaries between what is human and what is cosmic, what is earthy and what is divine, what it is godlike and what it is from the lower level. So the moment of physical existence became transformed. Fantastic. Because the moment of physical existence, as I said, it was like 1,000 polarities, yes? So then the explosion of time transform the moment, and you have some information that I want you to read it. And this is what I want you to really, if you're thinking about time, life is movement. We all agree that life is movement, and the life is creation, and the life is transformation, and the life is a divine gift that is unknown. You know, we all have thousands of ideas about what that is. Some of us innocently have objectified life. So we didn't know that life is the very thing that is what we call ourselves, that I am made of life. And, you know, I could never exist without life. In the formation of my physical existence, in the formation of my consciousness, in the formation of my feeling as human, and being in the planet Earth, it's all about life. So if we're thinking of life being from the beginning, or even before the beginning, being this infinite frame of reference, forever going. And if we wanted to put a whole year about here, it would say, okay, it has whatever frames we decide is self-contained in 1 minute, which will be the beat of the heart, or whatever time that it was thinking about taking in 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. But we know that the time is a measurement, like a clock, of the movements of the heavens. So what this image wanted to convey, is that the very moment of life in which we humans would experience life in the evolutionary nature of ourselves was called not the temporary, but the relative moment. And with the reality of the new consciousness, when we merge it, each frame became the recipient of the entire universal existence. So that's what, again, what Cynthia Divine is talking, that the frame of moment of your life is the self-containment of all things at once, and is also centralized in your human heart. That the actual moment, which is the frame of your human existence, self-contained within itself, the entire universe unfolding into infinity, and a spring from your human heart. That means that that Trinity is again one: the universe, the moment, and you, the moment, and the universe. This is something to contemplate, because the mind, when the mind begins to comprehend, there is the very thing that it is the wholeness of a context. When the mind comprehends, there is the very thing that is the wholeness of its context. The mind, for the first time, is home, because it's connected to the mind that always was and always will be, and is finally free from the mind that is being thought by a system that innocently could not yet match wholeness within wholeness. When the system could not match it before, we were all being thought. We get up in the morning, I don't feel well, oh, I don't know, well, I don't know, whatever, because the mind could not support us. The wholeness wasn't here. So when we enter the mind of wholeness, this is the first time that our mind, the linear mind, which is like, this enormous circus, I cannot use that word because it's now, this enormous field that it was complex in his existence became realigned with the real field, which became the universal consciousness, the intelligence that we call God, that is ever present. So it became fantastic. So then, because of that, then the moment became realistic. So in this image, once you read what it is here, implied that the wheel of time, the whole path of our human existence, from the beginning of the Big Bang, or from the moment of Genesis, whatever you want it. If you go from Genesis, it will be from Genesis. From the beginning of moment of time, became all the way to now. And in that moment, with the now merged in the whole field, this other wheel, which was the entire experience of our human cosmicity, the entire experience of the human cosmicity began simultaneously, like a bicycle chain, it became simultaneously interrelaced with each other. And each frame of interrelation becomes the eternal moment. So the moment of time became the moment of the universal clock. So we are moving simultaneously with the universe as a whole, at the same time that we are experiencing ourselves as a whole, as humans. We are inside of a cosmic voyage. Before, it was not available. We were in the human voyage trying to figure it out what happened. And that's the reason we projected the Star Wars and everything, because in the world that we projected as inside of the cosmos was all the same story of good and evil, always. Yeah, all the stories projected into time are always projected inside of the same story, that it will be a good and an evil fight, and there will be a moment in which the good will prevail, but in the last frame, before it prevails, the evil come forward again, because you have to have another movie or another out of everything. So that's the way it always existed. So this reality, we're talking about cosmic reality, it doesn't have duality. So it doesn't have evil. It always 100% benign, because it's the actual existence of existence. The actual existence of existence is God. So anyway, so the past and the future became one. And then the whole thing becomes the eternal moment, which means that that's the moment that we share as each other with everything. And then the moment became the holographic imprint of wholeness for ourselves and for the universe. So that's where we return to Genesis, the holographic imprints of wholeness, which was the tree of life, and got life in the garden, got reconnected as life itself. So we are unfolding for the first time inside of Genesis in the garden and inside of the evolutionary mind of Darwinian, and our connection to the cosmic self, becoming free from the innocent, not incarceration, because it's not a word that is innocent self-enclosure of the linear mind, reproducing itself continuously inside of the same story. Yes, we understand that what that is. So anyway, so this is the eternal moment, the eternal now. Remember that the Eckhart Tolle came over with the power of the now. That was a precursor of beginning to understand what we're talking about. The power of the now got interpreted as a place that you can find a lot of energy and you recover your spirituality. In the real now, your spirituality is already included. You don't have to recover anything. You actually, what you recover is your God self. So the spirituality disappears into the larger picture, which is the presence of you being the whole of the whole in the presence of God. So all the paths have merged into one. Remember that we said that all paths lead to the same place. Yes, you have confessed. I said, oh my God, what does it mean? All paths lead to the same place. I mean, it makes sense conceptually, but each path seems so complex because each path has an idea about it. And then if you get lost, you're going back into the circle again, which is like you disconnected for a while, you have to come back, blah, 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 blah. The reality is that it was true. All paths led to the same place. And they did. They brought us to the same place. This is something that is important to understand. We are in the garden. We are not going to be in the garden. This is something very, very important to understand, because the linear mind, if it still shows up, it will tell you, oh no, this is just here, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then you're going back again into in and out. I'm going to be there, I'm going to get there, or right here, but right now I'm here. So you're back in limbo innocently. Remember that that doesn't exist. You are now already in the fulfillment of everything, because not only it fulfills itself, but it fulfills humanity when you enter the kingdom of heaven as a reality, because everybody can experience it. Yeah, the new consciousness, without you experiencing it, it means nothing. It's just a concept, because in reality, it is the simultaneous nature of its existence and your experience and the physical moment. Yes, so here we go. Again, we're almost there now. The moment of life then became this exquisite thing, the geometry of life. I want you to read what is in here, because it's very important when you read it. And this is the moment of life inside of the whole field of consciousness. So remember that this one, you can see it, it's like a flower. And the reason it's like a flower, because a flower is something that is constantly changing. You can never, you can make a plastic flower, it will be always the same. We did it. We can, fantastic artistry. We were able to, the Chinese people, our Chinese brothers and sisters, will be able to create a flower that it looks just like exactly. But the wonderful thing is that it doesn't have the movement of life itself. So the reason that we created, because if you buy flowers all the time, it only lasts for again, and you have to have it again, and so forth. But the real flower is unfolding in the world and the consciousness all together now, the eternal reality of life. So here we are, in which the planet Earth, out of the perfection of our union, is now embraced by this beautiful design that has 10 hearts, and it's actually the new consciousness. Remember that we're talking about the fourth dimension, which is the number 4 of the 10 dimensions, and we're going to go through the 10 in order for us to give us the whole picture, the new consciousness of life. And the new consciousness of life brought us to, is actually this 10 fabric, exquisite fabric, embracing the planet. For now, the mother planet is fantastic, because it's supported by the physics of universe, but it's also supported by the physics of the human life. That is reason. that all this thing going in the planet right now, that everybody's saying, okay, we got to, they call it global warming, still thinking global warming. You have to get rid of the fossil fuels. You have to be careful of the sun, because the sun has become so distorted by all this, the air and everything that is harming us and so forth. But we still innocently, and it's working, they're still thinking innocently in terms of trying to save the environment. We don't understand that the environment is actually ourselves and the planet, and that we are realigning and making all the changes in our human consciousness that is reinstating the planet to its celestial perfection of health. The planet entered the Garden of Eden. That's what it was always. And becoming the Garden of Eden. And we're all becoming healthy, of course, because the garden is health and life is health. And the sun is the most beautiful thing that we have. It's the light of the world. So anyway, the 10 dimensions of life, then go into here. And there's the harmony on which the planet lives. It's beautiful. This is a good picture for us to see that right now it's a very complex, because in our particular moment in time, there is all the discussion. Do we have the money to be able to really clean the rivers? Do we have the money to be able to cut the oil from everything? Do we have the money? We're still innocently reverberating about that world that we were creating, in which we were all surviving. We are not understanding yet, and some, even though many of us are coming in, more and more will come because of the consciousness, that we are all creating the new world. And the new world is a world that encompasses all of us, that is beautiful, that is completely healthy, and that every time that we repair the world that we live in immediate world, the doors of the cosmic world opens for us. So we will have the intelligence that correspond to, we have already, excuse me, we will discover, we will find out that we have the intelligence to cure all things, to repair all things, to do everything, and to interconnect this with an extraordinary reality that is beyond a possible of imagination, but it is. So this is reinstated the harmony. And this is the voice of the species. If we look at it from the perspective of the Darwinian, the amoeba, returning into different stages of consciousness, the fish going into the sea, eating each other, the fish going to all levels of here, going into all levels of here, going into the primate, before the four-legged, into the two-legged, the family. This is what we have been alive in the planet Earth. It's a little bit hokey, but that's what it is. And this is the last few years. And with technology, because it's technology, put us in contact with the discovery that allows to understand the science, the science of being able to create a vehicle that will take us into another planet, and then to have the science to know exactly at what moment and time is going to be able to re-enter the planet, to be in the sea for us to come back. Just think about all the intelligence that it has taken us, science has taken us to merge us back again to the reality. So that was the last thing. And this is the fulfillment in which our human self has fulfilled this species. Two forms of fulfillment. Fulfill the Genesis idea that we recover our natural state inside of the garden, or the Darwinian idea that we have evolved through all the species, and that we have finally come into correspondence with the new mind that allow us to be the center of life itself, inside of the geometry of balance, which is the universe, inside of the fountain of life, inside of all things. So here we are. This is the fountain of life, inside of the planet Earth, inside of our existence, the new consciousness. Here are all the dimensions here, and as part of the geometry. This is the tree of life. The tree of life, when it was reinstated from Genesis. The tree of life was the symbol of unity, that it got preserved from the beginning of time. So at the moment of completion, when we enter the garden, we understand that this formation is actually a sphere. It's the formation of 3 dimensions, but it's self-contained within itself. Everything self-contains within itself consciousness, the unity of our 3 senses of self, the fountain of life, and it brings us into the understanding of our physical existence. This is why you study unity and motion. All the movements of unity and motion to understand the geometry, to become present in 3 dimensions, to be able to connect with the universe, to be able to allow the mind to understand all the things that I'm saying from the perspective of your mind, becoming into correspondence with the greater mind. And here we are again, that we are the fountain of life. It doesn't exist outside of ourselves. It exists internally and externally as one. It's the energy that is the very nature of our being. It's our formation from which we connect to all things. It's ever present. It's magical because for the first time, we are emoting the future. We have never before have emoted the future. We only emoted the projection of the linear mind into the things that we have liked us to experience. But now we are in the future. So here we are inside of the universe, and the universe is inside of ourselves. This is the unity in motion, the movements. This is the kingdom inside of our being. This is 3 dimension, because talking about simplicity, just go back into here. This is the extraordinary complexity right here in this symbol. The kingdom, the universe, the human body, the geometry of balance, the fountain of life, the tree of life, the 19 connections, all of it, blah, 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 forever. The whole scenario of what the mind represents. But in here, we have the reinstatement of 3 dimensions. This is what it is. The 6 directions of a space, the right and the left, the front and the back, the above and below, synchronize it in 1 instant. The 6 directions is the linear process from which the mind can describe the actual experience of 3 dimensions. You cannot describe 3 dimensions other than live, because we are the life of 3 dimensions, but we can understand it. Yes? In this, the crown represents the moment of renewal in which 3 dimensions is always 4th dimension. It's the instant, because nothing is 3 dimensions only exists as 3 dimensions because of 4th dimension. And 4th dimension only exists as 4th dimension because of 3 dimension. It's an added expression of wholeness, that they are essential to each other. And here we go now back into the Trinity. The 3-dimensional reality is the 3-dimensional reality created in a church of the Trinity. Crown, consciousness of unity, centralized by the moment of life, the Trinity. The tetrahedron, 1 tetrahedron, forming all the tetrahedrons. It's a movement relationship that never stops existing. It's a Trinity relationship. It's inseparable. It's the nature of who we are. The cosmos, the earthly reality, and the moment of life. God, the Son, and the Holy Spirit simultaneously as one, as the very nature of who we are. Because I am the Father, I am the Son, I am the Holy Spirit. Yeah, I am made of this Trinity. The Trinity doesn't exist outside of me. It's the consciousness, the experience, and the love. The consciousness is the crown, the Father. The Son is the experience. Yeah, the Son is the experience of the Father. The Spirit is the love that united all of us. So that's my makeup. I'm made of Father, I am made of Son. I carry the entire memory of human, the seed of existence. I'm made of Mother, the egg of life, which is the Holy Spirit. So it's all one. It's a divine thing. 3 dimensions and the Trinity are inseparably one. And this is just a couple of symbols. Many artists, I remember the name of this. Do you remember the name of this artist? Do you know who the man is? It's the one who created symbols, very exalted symbols about consciousness.
Alex Gray.
Alex Gray. Thank you very much, Alex Gray. We love you, Alex Gray. You are an angel. Alex Gray is a sort of a divine artist, because he showed us that the third eye, which is the Trinity, that Trinity, the crown, this will be the consciousness, and this will be unity, and this is the center of it, because it's not looking down, it's looking up, looking up, looking down. This is the center of consciousness, that is the whole sphere of life, that self-contained in this tradition, all the Jewish alphabet, but it self-contained all alphabets, and self-contained the illumination of our human consciousness, It's self-contained, the physical reality, a little bit robotic in that sense, but I think he wanted to portray the actual meats and bones of our physical existence. You know, it's beautiful, and color is exquisite as well. And then this is the last one, the last of the symbols, where he introduced it as well, which has to do with Hermes Trismegistus. I don't know if you know in the story of evolution, Hermes Trismegistus was called 3 times great because he was a precursor through the spirit of a lot of information that now makes perfect sense, because inside of the consciousness we can understand it, in which the physical body is eternal because it's made up of the very substance that the physicists call quantum entanglement, the smallest particle of form and the largest particle of form. It carries the caduceus, which, by the way, is the matrix of balance. Yeah, this is the light crown. This is the right and the left, and this is right here is the whole awareness. This is the right and the left of mind. This is the throat. Yeah, the center of what we're talking about, the 4th dimension, right here. This is the right and the left of the arms connected to the heart right here. This is the solar plexus connecting above and below and the center of life. This is the pelvis, right and left. And this is the pelvic floor connecting, interlacing into each other to go back again inside forever, inside of what we call Kundalini, or whatever you want to call it, the energy of life, you know, the electrical impulse that we call life. And it is angelic in its nature, because it is totally it moves with time. It's complex to talk about it because you cannot define it except just knowing that it's the moment of life itself. So anyway, the caduceus, the tree of life, our human self, spiraling now inside of the realms of eternity. The symbol was beautiful, but it got created and perhaps a little bit inside of the idea that we're going to get there. But here we are. Remember that here you are. Eternity means nothing other than you get to be connected personally in yourself with the whole field of consciousness as one. And you travel with existence. And you are eternal because all there is life, is eternal. And you cannot, if the mind come over, yeah, but I'm going to die, blah, 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 you can just say, okay, forget it. The moment is all there is. The moment, if you remain in the moment, I cannot use the word remain. If you remember that you are in motion with the moment, and then the moment is eternal, your mind will help you enormously, because it will disconnect you from a program that believes that you can get sick and you can die and you can really suffer and so forth. So just be in the reality of the present moment and let the present moment go and be with you. Yeah. It's not about being afraid of death, because I told you, it's not about wanting to be eternal, because if you want to be eternal, you wanting to be eternal, you're going to be temporal. Yeah, because the one thing creates the other one. So this reality doesn't have that. Am I going to die? Am I going to die? It doesn't have that question. If that question exists, then the symbol means nothing. So anyway, this is the last symbol that I want you for you to observe, in homage to Alex Gray, which was, he created beautiful, beautiful symbols. His book is absolutely exquisite. And this is for you to have. These are the 13 names defining the new consciousness of life, defining the 4th dimension. And these are the names, and these are the synthesis of each of them in a very short manner. And it's good to be with them, because it's the makeup of the whole of your mind. And the more that your mind exists inside of this field, the more that everything will become divine, because inside of this field, everything that you see is seeing you. Inside of this field of consciousness, everything that you see is seeing you, because that was the reality of the garden. And that had many connotations. It has connotations of fulfillment, of beauty, of self. All the other 6 expressions of consciousness are going to be, you're going to be able to understand it as being the gift that the whole field of consciousness giving you through the actual nature of your life, the nature of your life being the planet, the physical form, the ground in which you walk, the flowers that you see, the food that you eat, the love that you feel, the connection that you have with people, the mind giving you celestial awareness, of intelligence and perceptions that are coming into the consciousness to you because they correspond to the whole field. And they are being processed in some degree, so your mind can really comprehend it linearly through your own sense of self, so it doesn't produce any kind of a discomfort, but allows you to become more and more connected to the extraordinary consciousness that is universal life, where we are right now, the kingdom of heaven. Yeah. So anyway, here we are. I think that we did it. I think this is it. I can ask you if you have any little questions before we finish, but actually we're going. How are you doing? Are you okay? Yes, you are. Okay.
Beautiful, Christy.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you,
Okay,
Christy.
thank you. Thank you. We can come back to any of those images. Remember that we can return. This is to return. So if you have any questions, it's important because it means that some part of your mind is not yet coalescing with our understanding. And if we can help you to fill that gap or to fill that place, then it becomes natural for you. And then you can see it externally then, because whatever is internal as whole is here external as whole as well.
I
Okay.
love the format today, Ellen. The way that you've worked it out, it was so beautiful. Your picture, I don't know if you know, Christy, but your picture is over on the side when we're looking at the screen. So,
Oh, really? Oh, how wonderful.
yeah, it was.
And I get to
very
see you a
lovely.
little bit too in this.